Lesson 5, working with things as they are. I remember years ago, I was expressing regret to my father over something that hadn't worked in the past, and I remember his comment, "The wonderful world of might have been." How many of us live in a world that might have been? Or how many of us live in a world of, "I wish it were"? We wish things that other than they really are. And as long as we have that wish, we can't really work with things as they are. You are at the horse races wishing that your horse would get ahead. When it's not ahead, well, you can push it up to a certain point mentally. Not that the horse will do anything, but your own mind can be pushing it. But when it's finally ended, then it's ended. The important thing to remember is that whatever you're working with, you have to work with reality, not with dreams. And unfortunately, most people, to some extent, whether less or more, are like the kings of classical legend, I don't know how many have actually done it, who shoot the bearer of bad tidings or lop off his head rather than accept the bad tidings. They don't want to face a reality. Well, unfortunately, reality has a way of forcing you to face it sooner or later. And so if you can just face that right away and just say, I want to know what the facts really are. There is, however, another aspect to that, and it's an important one, because we can get so bogged down in facts that we lose creativity. You see, there's the reality that is, and there's the reality that might be. And so I'm not saying don't live, don't live in that potential that you can make happen by affirming that this must be, by working for it to become so. You can turn failure into success. You can turn disaster into triumph. But first of all, you've got to be aware of what is. And this is the point that I'm talking about. When I speak of facing things, accepting things as they are, I don't mean to accept them passively, fatalistically. I mean, see what the realities are, know what you have to work with, and then you'll know how much energy, how much creativity you need to generate in order to change those realities into something more desirable. For example, if your horse is losing at the race, well, you might learn which horse is more likely to win in the next one, or if you own the horse, you might try to develop the horse so he runs better. In business, the same thing. If you find that you're losing ground, then instead of trying to affirm that everything's just fine, I've seen this happen. There was a company that was working so much on an affirmed success. They were talking about millions that they were going to be earning, and I listened to this for a while, and I was really impressed with their expectations, and I thought they must know what their potentials are. It looks great. But as I looked at it more and more, I saw that their expectations, their affirmations, their belief system wasn't corresponding to the realities at all. And so, because I had some connection with them as a friend, I invited a few of them over, just as a friend, and tried to get them to think in terms of things they could do, because they were at that point aware already that the whole company was just about on the rocks. I wanted to help them, and I wanted to suggest certain things they could do that would make it possible for them to save the situation. They didn't want to. They wanted to go on in their belief system. Even though they saw that they were headed for failure, they didn't want to think in terms of doing anything differently, because this is the way things work. They weren't working, but they had defined it. They had convinced themselves that this is how things have to be done to work, and so they failed. Well, if you can see things as they are, then you can start looking around for other possibilities to make them something better. Work with reality. Work with not just dreams. You have to be a dreamer if you're going to be creating things. A leader has to be a visionary. But don't be that kind of visionary who is completely divorced from reality. You have to be practical in your idealism. You have to take the steps necessary to actualize your ideas. And this means very many times just walking through mud, walking through difficult circumstances. You can't always be flying. You can't always be doing the easy jobs. There was one woman I knew who was starting an organization, and she was talking about sending out mailings. And she was the president of this organization. I don't think there were any subordinates as yet. She was the president. And I remember her comment to me at the time. She was saying, talking about the mailings, I shouldn't have to do that. Well, who else was there to do it? You've got to be a peon if there are no peons there. A leader has to be willing to do anything and not consider anything below his station in life. A man I knew in Kashmir has, I know he's a good friend of mine, but he has a very successful handicraft industry. And when he was a young man, others would sit in their shops waiting for customers to come. He would put shawls and different things that he had to sell over his shoulders and go out looking for people. He would put the energy out because he saw that's what the reality was. He may have had this business, inherited in fact from his father. He may have had a certain importance in the community, but that wasn't what was going to make the money come in. That wasn't what was going to make sales. And so he went out and did what he had to do because he was facing the reality and not thinking it should be something else. As a result, he has by far the most successful business of its kind in Kashmir. Well, the same thing is true with you. Don't give yourself airs, if I may be so bold as to put it that way, but just take reality as it is, take the facts as they are, and take what you need to do as what you will do, rather than thinking, well, I don't want to get my hands dirty. A leader must be willing to get his hands dirty, and you will be far more magnetic if you're attuning yourself to reality rather than living off in some little dream world of your own, because the reality forms a broad base that supports anything that you try to do, where your own little creation will have no basis to it at all. When you work in harmony, when you play in harmony with the symphony orchestra, your own instrument sounds good, and the music you all produce sounds good. And so when you play in harmony, work in harmony, think in harmony with reality, it may be a stern reality, it may be a hard taskmaster, it may be boring sometimes, but it's the only way to really accomplish great things. I'll leave you with an example. When science began its investigation that we've seen has led to the great explosion of knowledge that we've experienced in the last 4 centuries, it began with rather pedestrian, rather humdrum questions that it asked of life. It wasn't interested in all sorts of highfalutin ideas like the classical scholastic question as to how many angels could dance on the head of a pin. It was interested in measurable things, mass, weight, motion, things that in themselves aren't very interesting. But it was a discipline that was in tune with the reality of its time. And with that discipline, look what they've come to discover. A universe far more staggering to the imagination than anything that people could imagine in the theological heyday of the medieval scholastic era. With 100 billion galaxies, with quasars and dark holes, and in our a planet that's just a tiny little mud ball in this great galaxy of our own, a universe that isn't even made of matter but of energy, and so on and on and on. The discoveries that have come from adhering to a discipline that could be shown to be allied to reality rather than just to wishful thinking has led to the adventure of this scientific era. And I will venture to say that if you will follow that same principle, whether in business or in your home or in your books or in your theology, in your own private life, whatever it might be, you will find that that will be the basis for any solid accomplishments you may finally achieve.